Okay, so this is the next unit tutorial to do with physics. So we took a look at how to create physical objects in 2D, how to make them move in like two different ways. So now I'm just going to show you interaction. So I will just create 2D sprite square, and I will set up a little environment using just sprites and box colliders. So these are going to be my let's call them walls. So that's a wall. There's one of them here. I will duplicate this, put it here. I'll duplicate this, and I will make this like that. And let's add another one, like maybe here. So this should be good enough for just a little environment. So these are 4 walls. So now I just want to have an interactive object, and I will create a sprite. Let's make it orange so it stands out. Like maybe let's go for red, like magenta. And this is going to be my player. So that's a player object, and it will need a box collider. It will need a rigid body 2D. So if I'll press play now, it should just fall down. Okay, so this is working as expected. So for now we'll make gravity scale 0. So basically when I press play, the object doesn't fall down, it just stays in place. And I just want to control it. So I'll add a player controller. So create script player controller. You can call it player controller, player movement, and I will just add it here. Nope, it's still compiling. Okay, so my script is added. I'll open that up, and I just want to make so I just want to move it using physics. So first I will need my x input and my y input. So float x input, float y input. So you can see in new Visual Studio we have really good auto predict. It's actually did pretty good job at predicting of what I want to type. So now I just want to access my rigid body and move my object using these inputs. So first let's assign x input and y input. So x input, so for me it will be input dot get axis. So x is horizontal, so make sure you spell that correctly. Horizontal, always double check your strings. And then I will add y input. So input dot get axis, vertical, vertical, vertical. Looks right to me. Okay, so this is happening. So now I will create. I think at first let's store our rigid body as a variable, because you can make your code a little bit shorter. I will show you how. So I will create a rigid body 2D, and I'll call this RB. And when the game starts, I will assign this variable. So rigid body 2D will be get component rigid body 2D. So I'll just press tab. So you can see I'm simply assigning in my code this component here. So rigid body variable becomes this. So now we have access to that on start. And I think in fixed update I just want to convert that to movement. So void fixed update, so fixed update function. And now I can just type in rb dot velocity is new vector 2, and we have x input for x-axis and y input for y-axis. Okay, so this should already work. I think it might be a bit slow because the values only go from from -1 to 1, so it's not very much. Yeah, but I've got movement. So this is moving. So again, I will add another variable, call it float speed, and I think I'll just multiply my inputs by speed. Again, you can have different speed for, you know, X and Y input. In this case, I'm just keeping it the same. And let me set my speed value to 10. I should be good enough. So this is working. Let's test if it's faster. So it's a good practice. Every time you make a little change, make sure you actually added that change and test it, see that it works in the way that like you predicted. And if not, then, you know, double check your code. Okay, so I'm moving much faster now. And I'll show you the reason, you know, why I stored my rigid body inside of a variable, because so, you know, you can do it this way, which you know, I think is pretty good, but you could also do it, you know, get component rigid body to the dot velocity, and, you know, then you can carry on typing the same thing like this. So effectively I'm doing the same thing here, but here I'm working with a stored variable, which is, you know, we store it at the beginning, and here I'm continuously finding that component on each fixed update. So it's like a little bit less efficient, but you can do it like that if you want to, if you don't have too many objects that are doing it this way. But just to show you, this will have exactly the same output. So here we go. So this looks exactly the same, but as you can see, if I well, deleted this, this will work in the same way, and it will look cleaner, because typically you want to keep your code like as clean and as short as possible. Okay, so this is working. So now I just want to add another object that I will interact with. So I will add this square here, and maybe I'll change its color so it looks a little bit different. Maybe I'll make it gray, like this. And of course it will need a box collider so that I can collide with it. So this is happening. Yeah, let's just check that I can collide with it. Okay, so you can see I'm colliding with it. I'm also rotating a lot because I did not freeze player's access. Let me just quickly go to rigid body constraints and freeze my rotation. So this is good. Yeah, so now I'm not rotating when I'm hitting it at an angle. So this is good. This is basic setup. So now I just want to have some sort of response. Like I want to know, you know, if I collided with that object, that something happens. And so there are different ways of doing it, but I think straightforward one is, you know, you can put it on a player, or you can put it on your like object that you're colliding with, but you have to make sure that at least one of them has a rigid body. So in my case, my player has a rigid body, so that means this object does not need to have a rigid body. It only needs a box collider. Okay. And I think I will just add a script on here to detect players' collisions. So create C# script, call it detect collision, and I will place it on my square after compilation. Okay, here we go. So we will not be using any of these functions. We will be using so there are a few. So there's on collision enter 2D, right? And make sure you're using, if you're working with 2D engine, you're working, you know, on collision 2D functions, not this one, but this one. So on collision enter, then we have on collision stay. So this is the second one. So this is while I'm staying, like touching the object. And there's a third one, on collision exit 2D. So this is when I leave the object. So what I want to happen is I want to simply just change my gray squares color. So I'm going to access get component sprite renderer dot color is color dot red. So if something will touch a gray square, it will become red. And for now, let's just do that. Let's just do that. Nothing else. Okay, so you can see I've touched it and it turned red. And you know, every time I'm touching it, it's still running that command, but since it's red after the first time, it just stays red. So the second one I can do is, let's say, so we have on collision enter, on collision stay, so while I'm touching the object, and we have on collision exit. So let's say when I leave the object, it will turn back to gray. So yeah, English or American spelling, that's up to you. Okay, so now red, gray, red, gray. Okay, so we clearly see difference. So you can also detect while something, you know, is being touched. So let's do that and change it to like green maybe. So while I'm touching this object, it will be green. So I'll press play. So you can see what's happening right now. So before, like on start, it changes red. Then while I'm touching the object, it's staying green, and then when I leave it, it goes back to gray, right? But the transition between red is so fast, red to green, that you don't even see it. So this is something to be aware of. Like, even though the script is, you know, definitely happening, I can even, you know, prove it to you. So print enter. So on enter I'll print enter. On stay I will print stay, and on exit I will print exit. Here we go. And I will pull up the console. Okay, so window, general, console. Okay, it's here. And I'll just press play. So let's see what's going on here. Okay, so I'm not touching anything. So you can see I entered and I'm staying. And now if I leave, I got exit, right? And I've got enter happening only once. Stay multiple times because I was touching the object continuously, and exit also happened just once. And you can see if I'll do it again, so these numbers, that should be 2, and this should be 2 as well when I leave. So 1, 2, so you can see. Okay, so this is how you can you know, touch different objects and have some sort of response. So the next thing to do from here would be, I think I'll just remove these messages, because you know, I already know it works, so I don't need to see them again. So now I think the next thing to do is to make sure that I'm colliding with the correct object. I will just create another object here. This will just be, so I'll have box collider, I'll give it a rigid body, and I'll just, you know, make it different color just so it stands out. And this is I'll just call it other object. Here we go. So this object should just fall down, right? So you can see this is still working in the same way as this. So other objects as well as my player, they, you know, trigger this little object. They change its color to red. So now, you know, natural question is like, what if I only want my player to be able to interact with this, so nothing else, only the player? So you can do that easily. So you can either, you know, check what, you know, what object, like what its name, what's touching that object, or you could also work with tags. So for example, I could change this to player. So now my player is tagged as player, and if I go to the script, I can keep my, you know, scripts exactly the same, but I will just add the little if statement. So if collision, so collision, this is basically an array of all the objects that are colliding with me. So if that particular object, so collision dot transform dot tag, so if its transforms tag is player, then I can, you know, change to red, right? Let's just add brackets for clarity. Here we go. And I will just copy and paste that a few times. So if you're staying with player, then this happens. And then if you, so if player stopped touching the gray box, it will turn back to gray. So save, go back, compile your script. I'll press play. So immediately you saw this object. So even though it collides with it, it has, you know, physical response and interaction. It does not light it up, but my player does. Or I can maybe even use my player to, you know, touch the other object, and it wouldn't make any difference. But if I am touching it, then it's working. And you could always, you know, make this object into a player too, and then it will suddenly work. So this is how you can, you know, differentiate between different objects and decide, you know, which object should be collidable, which object shouldn't be collidable. Okay, so we've done that. Of course, you know, you could do other things, like you can start maybe rotating this object, or you can, like, this could be like a key. So if I picks up this key, it opens up a door. You can do all kind of things. For now, I think let's keep this as is, and I will create another room, or maybe like a hidden room. So let's do it like that. So this is my other room here. Something like this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another square on top of all of this, which will hide this room. So I will need to touch this room to see it, right? So for now, let's just do it like this. Just for now, let's make it a little bit different color so I can see what it is. But, you know, after a while we can change it to white. I could also maybe change its ordering layer, so basically it's behind our walls, so it could be here. And so what I want to do is, let's leave like a little, yeah, like a little pathway, so it's like something is possible, right? And then I will add a collider, so box collider 2D, here it is. So if I left it as is, you know, like what's gonna happen, I will just bump into the yellow square, you know, and this will be it. I just bumped into it. But I want to be able to pass through it. So if I want to pass through my object, then I will need to change it to a trigger. So this is this. Let's call it something like a hidden room. So I will make it into a trigger. So what will happen now is I will be able to walk through this. So like that, right? But it still has a box collider, so this is good. Because we could still communicate with player objects. So let's add another script. Let's call this one hidden room. And what I want this room to do is when I touch it, it will become transparent, and when I leave, it becomes visible again. And then after that, we'll change it back to white. But just for demonstration's sake, it's easier to see it in a different color. Okay, so here's our hidden room. I'll add the hidden room script. It's a trigger, so that's all good. I'll open that. And so this time, instead of using on collision enter, on collision stay, on collision exit, I can use on trigger enter, stay, and exit. And again, it'll be in 2D. So let me just show you all of the functions. So on trigger enter 2D, so that's one. On trigger stay 2D, and on trigger exit 2D. And this works in exactly the same way. I can even put them side by side. So these work in exactly the same way. So this is when you enter the object, stay on the object, and leave the object. But the only difference is it's a trigger, so I'm able to like walk into the object, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my hidden room, and what I need to use is on trigger enter. So I need to know when I enter the object and when I leave the object. On trigger stay is not important in this case, but you know, the function is available for you to use. So I think for now I'll just remove it because it's not adding anything. But yeah, so if something will touch the hidden room, I just want to change my sprite. So get component sprite renderer dot color is color dot so let's go with maybe red. So if I touch it, it becomes red, and if I leave it, it will become white. So this kind of like a simple interaction. Okay, press play. Okay, so here's my player, and you can see I've entered it, it became red, I left, it became white. So now instead of, you know, having it as red, I obviously want to make it transparent. So I could potentially just create a new color and just set the values in. So let's do 0, 0, 0, 0, or you know, so this would be black and also transparent. You know, you can make it 1, 1, 1, 1 and 0, and that would be white and transparent. So this is entirely up to you. Let me just show you what these values represent. So you know how we have our colors, they are yeah, let's just use RGB 0 to 1. So so the difference was 0, 0, and 0. So this is like black but transparent. It's actually, it doesn't matter which color you use, just as long as it's transparent is fine. So I will effectively in my code I will be doing this, but for now I will keep it white. So you know, when I start, the hidden room is white. It looks like, you know, not much is going on there, but when I will touch it, it will become transparent, and then it will become white when I leave. Okay, so you can see I'm entering the room, activating it, and it's visible and invisible. And we kind of have a similar thing going on as before, where, you know, if I took my other object, which, you know, has physics, and I placed it here, it would also activate it. So you might want to have a similar piece of code that says, you know, if player's transform.tag is player, only then make the room visible, and if player leaves, then only then make it invisible. So we could actually, you know, quickly do that. So if collision.tag is player, again I will add brackets, and here we go, and I will just copy that. I think it's player with a capital, yeah. So copy, paste. Okay, so now only player is able to activate it. Okay, so I'm pressing play. And there we go. I can walk in and I can leave. Now this object will not do anything. Like, it still exists, it's still interactive, but it's not going to do anything. Because it's not called, its tag is not player. A small thing to notice, which, you know, might be a bit confusing, but like there's a slight difference between these two scripts. So let me just zoom them out a bit. Yeah, hopefully you can see them. So yeah, we have, you know, all of your basics on collision. So on collision, enter, stay, and exit, and then you have similar thing going on here. On trigger, enter, stay, and exit. The only difference is when you are looking for a tag. In collisions, you have to say collision.transform.tag, and then you can access your tag. And for some reason, if you're using triggers, you don't actually need to say transform. You can just say tag directly. So this is just a little thing to watch out for. But yeah. So yeah, we have this going on. And you know, what's powerful about this code is I can now make like other rooms, and this script will still work. So for example, I will just quickly make another room here, like this, maybe like that. So here's like my other room, and so here's my hidden room. I will just duplicate it and I'll move it here. Okay, and you know, it should work in the same way. Okay, so now I can enter here, leave. I could enter here and leave, and it still works. So I think another thing to watch out for, you know, whenever you are detecting objects, you know, you have to make sure it's more to do with your logic that, like, you know, should the room be detecting the player, or should the player be detecting the room? I think in this case it's very obvious. You know, this is room that just changes its transparency from visible to invisible, and it's just waiting for a player to like collide with it, and then it will change transparency. So for me it makes sense to write hidden room code on the hidden room, because that's where it should be. You could alternatively, you know, have that on the player, but I think player should only be responsible for itself. You should only know, you know, movement, maybe interaction with other characters and enemies, but you shouldn't really know about the room. The room should be aware of the player, if that makes sense. But yeah, hopefully that helps. Hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, try to make a little, maybe a dungeon using all of these concepts that I have just shown you.